Hello and welcome. My name is Douglas Comer, and I'm president of the United States National Committee of the International Council on Monuments and Sites, the ICOMOS National Committee for our country. However, I'm speaking to you from Oaxaca, Mexico, where I'm presenting at the General Assembly of the International Council on Monuments and Sites National Committee of Mexico. In the United States, our national committee is using as a public name, World Heritage USA. This name conveys our goals and objectives because all heritage is essentially cultural, and most certainly this is the case in the Americas, as we will see. To our sister national committees, and there are more than 100 of them, and we will work more closely with them in the future than we do even in the present, we present ourselves unmistakably as the United States National Committee of ICOMOS. What I will talk about here in Oaxaca is closely aligned, and in fact, it's intertwined with what we as the United States National Committee have been doing for the past year, and actually more. The topics I will speak about here in Oaxaca are cultural and natural sites endangered or damaged by the construction of the wall between the US and Mexico. The possible inclusion of binational sites on the US and Mexican tentative lists, including at least one that faces grave threats because of the wall construction. The International Underground Network to Freedom, which you will soon hear more about. In this, we have the participation of an emerging scholar from Mexico in putting together the list of places and people that will go on a story map being created for this. An overarching message in the Americas, the United States and Mexico included, is that all protected sites and landscapes are cultural, even if they have come to the attention of the public because of natural features. All were once the homelands of indigenous peoples. We in the United States, Mexico, and all the Americas are living with the legacy of colonialism. And we are only now beginning to deal seriously with that. Therefore, to secure sustainability for our protected sites and landscapes, we must acknowledge the cultural importance of protected areas to indigenous groups and include them in decision-making and management, because they are de facto stewards of vast tracts of the global landscape that are essential to reducing and ultimately reversing, with any luck, the course of climate change. And one must acknowledge another aspect of colonialism, that of slavery. You will soon hear about the toolkit for decision-making regarding the disposition of monuments associated with oppression that our National Committee is assembling. We have a lot to cover. So with that, I will introduce Destry Jarvis, our Vice President, who will moderate our annual meeting for today. And I thank you so much for doing this, Destry, and I thank you all for listening.
Glad you're all with us today. We have to start with two important sort of action items that require membership approval. The board, one of them has to do with a bylaws revision. The Board of Trustees has approved this change, but it's merely a recommendation until it is affirmed by the membership. So we're changing one sentence in the bylaws, essentially allowing officers to serve 3 terms instead of 2. That brings us into conformance with ICOMOS International, whose own bylaws allow 3 consecutive terms. It's a fairly simple one-sentence deletion from our bylaws, and that's all it takes. So we ask for your vote. There'll be 1 minute to indicate your position, and staff will tabulate the results quickly. Okay, thank you all very much. We had 90% approval and several abstentions. So the bylaw revision is approved. Our second action item will be membership approval of the new trustees and the slate of officers for the coming year. We have 6 new members proposed for the board that the trustees have previously agreed to forward to the membership for approval. Ariana, if you can put up the list, folks, you may look these over. Hey, Ariana, if you can put up the poll. Oh, well, let's go ahead with this as well. So we have 3 existing trustees whose first term has expired and will be recommended by the trustees for an additional term. Mayor Bell, Tom Cassidy, and Wayne Donaldson. Those of you who've been members for the past several years will recognize all 3 of them. They eagerly request an opportunity to serve another term. This slate of officers is a continuation of this past year, asking for your vote of confidence for the 4 of us to serve an additional year in these positions. Okay, thank you very much. The new trustees and the slate of officers have been approved. As we move ahead with the agenda, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Cequyna Moore, who is the director of our Monuments Project. Cequyna has a top-notch team of staff members, some full-time and some part-time, that are working with her on this. I will say that, without stealing her thunder here, that this is the single most important thing that World Heritage USA has been doing this past year. It is putting down our marker on this issue. We have another year for it to go. This has been sustained by a grant from the Mellon Foundation as a part of a much larger monuments project that they have sponsored with a number of organizations, of which we are one. Our particular piece that Cequyna is doing a marvelous job with is dealing with monuments of oppression, not just Confederate Civil War monuments or Jim Crow monuments, but a broader array that Cequyna will talk about. So Cequyna, take it away.
All right, thank you, Destry. Good afternoon. As Destry mentioned, my name is Cequyna Moore, and I am the program director of the Monuments Toolkit project. Since work started for the project in 2022, our programming has grown by leaps and bounds, and we are continuing to grow for 2023. And so far, I just really wanted to share with you what we accomplished this year.
2022 has been a year of magnificent strides for the conversation around monuments of oppression. People around the country are continuing to address the problematic figures in their backyards, and this has created more legislative action to make a difference. The Monuments Toolkit has been deeply in tune with this movement, releasing content that center racial justice and social justice from marginalized communities from around the world. Some of these activities include the release of the Monumental Project podcast with guests such as Hamza Walker, Bonnie McDonald, and Mayor LeVar Stoney.
You may see that as just symbolism, but as we all know, in the United States of America, symbols matter. Symbols matter.
Our monthly webinar series brings community leaders, authors, academics, and artists together to help drive the conversation forward.
That's how important this issue actually is, and that's why we need to educate and really be clear with the next generations about this.
We conducted site visits from around the country, providing first-person accounts of controversial monuments, as well as accompanying research from a variety of fields. We are continuously building upon an organic social media presence on all major platforms and releasing engaging content for all demographics. We convened conference panels to highlight the impact of the monuments discussions at the National Trust for Historic Preservation's Fast Forward Conference and the Association for the Study of African American Life and History Conference.
These objects are so much more than stone or metal, that they're community, that they're representation, that they're identity.
The Monuments Toolkit had an amazing 22, filled with achievements and support from all around the country. We can't wait to see what 2023 brings. From the Monuments Toolkit team, thank you, and let's keep going.
So 2022 has been, we had a lot of events that are happening in 2022. And again, we are excited for 2023 and the unveiling of many programming and additional resources that can foster the monuments discussions. So one of these resources is the mobile app. We are excited that the mobile app will not only connect the user with case studies related to monuments, but also actions, including court cases, community meetings, and other resources that presents additional insight and information about a particular monument or any particular monument, and makes it easier to get involved with the discourse. Again, the key focus of the Monuments Toolkit project is to foster civic engagement and then also to encourage conversations between the community and government. Can you go to the next slide, please? One of these initiatives, or one of our programming, is the Pass the Mic initiative. And we realize that a lot of these community or these conversations are happening at the community level. And we want to help amplify the community's voices. With the Pass the Mic initiative, we invite the general public to share with the world an essay, a song, a video that highlights monuments discussions within the community. And can you go on to the next slide, please? One of the things that we're also excited about for 2023 is Monument Summer. Monument Summer will feature a series of events, and we're calling it Monument Summer, a season of dialogues. These dialogues will convene community members, community leaders, artists, government officials and representatives, museum professionals, historians, mediators, and students to explore painful histories and center communities whose stories are not being told, in order to rise above our challenges to heal together as a global community. And I invite you all to sign up at www.worldheritageusa for additional information. Can you go on to the next slide, please? And again, I just really wanted to thank you for being present and for also being a part of our programming and to make sure that this is a success. All of our work would not be possible without the generous support of the Mellon Foundation. And I would also like to thank our advisory panel and also the Monuments Toolkit staff, William Humphrey, Miles Ezelo, Gilbert Correa, and Destiny Hurd for your tireless work that made 2022 a successful year. And we look forward to 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Cequyna. That was terrific. I want to mention a few other things that have occupied our time and attention this year. Most especially, we've worked hard with our fellow colleagues in the Advocacy for Preservation world and the U.S. Congress, seeking approval of funding to pay the back dues. You may recall that the last administration withdrew America from UNESCO and therefore has not been paying our dues to either UNESCO or to the World Heritage Center. It's important for our standing in the world. It's important for our sites on the tentative list and for general support for cultural heritage preservation around the world, since the U.S. pays more than half of the total budget of the World Heritage Center when it was doing so annually. The good news is that both the House and the Senate have approved the funding and paying of back dues in their proposed fiscal 23 appropriation. But neither the House nor Senate have passed that act yet. We're in the lame duck session of Congress. They have until the 16th, very soon, to either approve it or extend the continuing resolution that's in effect at the moment. The latest news this morning is they expect to extend that continuing resolution till probably December 22nd or 23rd, during which time the appropriation committees in the House and the Senate hope to bring up the omnibus appropriation bill for 23, which does contain those dues. If that fails, they will either pass a short continuing resolution into early next year, or perhaps a year-long continuing resolution, neither of which would likely contain the dues. So we're sort of on tenterhooks, but continuing to hope and pray and work in support of getting these back dues paid, because it matters to the success of the World Heritage Program around the world. Another initiative that has occupied us quite a bit this year is the threat to Chaco Culture World Heritage Site in New Mexico. This map represents what I will call encroachment of oil and gas leasing on Bureau of Land Management lands that surround Chaco Culture National Historic Park, and the portions of the World Heritage Site that lie outside the boundaries of the park on lands administered by the Bureau of Land Management. Fortunately, Interior Secretary Deb Haaland has announced her intent to seek withdrawal of these lands, these public lands, federal lands, from further oil and gas leasing development. The final action has not been taken, but that is under serious consideration by the department, going through public process, going through its necessary NEPA and Section 106 compliance to consider making a final decision, hopefully within the next year, because the archaeological ruins, so to speak, of the Chacoan culture that lie, particularly the ones outside the boundaries of the park, known as the outliers, are seriously threatened by encroachment, by road access, by the vibrations of drilling and spillage. So we hope this action can be taken in the coming months. I will also say we spent a lot of time trying to secure funding from the National Park Service for the restoration of San Juan National Historic Park and World Heritage Site in Puerto Rico. There's a $50 million backlog of deferred maintenance at this important site. And the threats to the fort and the surrounding landscape is coming from more serious storms and sea level rise that is damaging the fortress. Park Service traditionally ranks its masonry fortresses in the lowest category for funding of deferred maintenance because they are seemingly indestructible. This one is more vulnerable. This one is the only one of those masonry fortresses that's a World Heritage Site, and it deserves the full funding necessary to protect this important site from storm surge and sea level rise. So we've been advocating with the service to use some of their Great American Outdoors money, which they have a substantial increase for, specifically for deferred maintenance projects. So the funding is available. The question is whether it's a high enough priority to get funded, and we've been advocating that they do so. I will stop there for the moment and introduce Dr. Helaine Silverman from the Board of Trustees, who will talk to us briefly about the role that the webinars that we have been running play in or can play in furthering education in general. I would say that, you know, we've run 15 or more webinars specifically on individual World Heritage inscribed sites in the US and the tentative list sites. Is just one example. Most recently, White Sands, from the tentative list, White Sands National Monument in New Mexico is an important site, and even more so now because of the recent discovery of 23,000-year-old human footprints in the now stone. It was mud at the time that those footprints were made. That moves back the known date of arrival of humans in North America beyond what had been understood to be the case. So this is an important site that we think should eventually be inscribed on the World Heritage List. And with that, Helaine, if you would proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Destry. When COVID-19 hit in March 2020, institutions around the world scrambled to accommodate themselves to a new Zoom reality. Universities switched to online teaching, businesses became more virtual than before, and cultural heritage organizations discovered a powerful new tool of public outreach through webinars and lectures. US ICOMOS jumped in and quickly mastered the technology and the innovative zeitgeist of the times. US ICOMOS produced an exceptional number of virtual events with expert speakers dealing with significant topics. Destry Jarvis did the heavy lifting of recruiting managers at US World Heritage sites and presenters from the National Park Service office in Washington, D.C. for these events. And Doug Coma recruited foreign managers for the internationally themed webinars and lectures and for the annual celebration of World Heritage with its many short topical videos from around the world. Importantly, the webinars and lectures were put on the YouTube channel of World Heritage USA, making them an invaluable resource for the public. And in my case, for my graduate students, I integrated various of the webinars into my heritage management course according to the topics I was emphasizing. For instance, stakeholder concerns in World Heritage sites located in urban settings, such as the San Antonio missions. And I had the students watch the videos I'd chosen and discuss the main points and issues raised. On Saturday, I sent to my students and my North Americanist colleagues Ariana's list of webinars dealing with Indigenous heritage because my department emphasizes Native American studies. And I'm going to share the list of webinars oriented to conflict and heritage with our Center for Global Studies. And I can send the list of those webinars concerned with social justice to our African American Studies program. In other words, what I'm trying to show is how these webinars can indeed be integrated into education. And what I hope is that those of us who are teaching at universities can publicize themed groups of webinars, and maybe we'll be able to gain traction in their use. I also think that OLLI may offer a receptive audience for World Heritage USA. OLLI, O-L-L-I, OLLI is the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, and it's a program of continuing education for adults over 50 that's found around the country, usually affiliated with a university. I contacted my OLLI, and I'm going to give a talk in April about World Heritage USA, and you can be sure that there will be a handout in physical and digital form with a categorized list of the webinars, and importantly, with an invitation for OLLI members to join our organization, World Heritage USA. We also could arrange for screenings of particularly hot topics at our public libraries, again, gaining a niche of that kind of adult, and I'll let you know what happens. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Charles Musiba, who will speak about the International Exchange Program and Inclusive Heritage. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Charles Musiba. I'm the new chair for the IEP committee, and I'm happy to report to you that as a committee, we have a wonderful year this year. We just finished one of our IEP program with interns. This year we have interns come from 7 countries, US, Brazil, Belgium, India, Ethiopia, and Serbia. And they had their wonderful experience working here in the United States. And I should say that this was due to the fact that we have a wonderful team of coordinators for the IEP. And I would like to actually sort of pause and actually give a thanks to Lydia Alapesco for coordinating this program. As a new chair, of course, I'm still navigating and working with everybody, try to actually sort of make sure that our program grows. We have hired a new coordinator, Helaine, who has actually sort of joined us. But at the same time, I should say that Helaine Cunningham comes in with wonderful international conservation and cultural heritage management background. Helaine has worked as a program coordinator for the European Heritage Volunteers in Albania and Kosovo. And of course, she holds a master's degree in heritage conservation site management from Brandenburg University of Technology in Cottbus in Germany. She's also had a Bachelor's of Arts degree in history from John Cabot University in Rome, Italy. So she's well traveled, I should say, and also she's got wonderful experiences coordinating such programs like IEP. Our committee continues to be represented by Ellen DeLange, Salah Ladinois, Emily Choi, Caroline Chang, Lydia Lopesco, and Amy Teeth and myself. I'd also like to actually point out that the EPN, or Emerging Professional Working Group, as well as the Emerging Professional Network, has also got a new coordinator, a new representative, I must say, and that's Amy Teether, who actually sort of accepted the nomination and joined this wonderful group. Amy Teether is actually U.S. citizen, but has got a Peruvian British American sort of qualitative and quantitative storyteller sort of experiences, and has done an absolutely amazing work in various as a communicator of a cultural communicator, coming from basically working with community development and outreach as a program project manager. Teether received the MA in documentary arts from the University of Cape Town and their Bachelor of Science in Social Sciences from Birkbeck University of London. So again, we have this group, wonderful group of people with international exposures. We have just rolled out our announcement for our 2023 IEP exchange program. And we are really looking forward to working with various hosts, and we are working on expanding hosts, and we're going to be in conversation with other international organizations and institutions and try to see if we could expand that. As you can see, our program seems to be heavily sort of with members, the majority coming from the Global North. We would like to expand this program to actually have the Global South represented as well. And also, we are hoping that we can start to think about it in how we can tap in, for instance, for indigenous communities to actually make sure that we are actually becoming truly inclusive in programs like this, particularly when we talk about conservation and preservation of heritage. Whose heritage are we talking about? And if we are not necessarily bringing some of those marginalized voices in which actually part of this heritage is also theirs, then we actually need to start to rethink a little bit more. How inclusive are we going to be? And to just use an example, which I will take from Farmer, who is actually a medical anthropologist working in Haiti in the 80s and 90s, talking about structural violence. We need to think about what is exactly structural violence. It's a violence in which actually sort of systematically is actually sort of imposed on those marginalized voices in a way that we don't see direct harm. And in a sense of heritage management, the exclusion of indigenous knowledge in actually any management plans, it is actually part of a structural violence, because it does not necessarily look and it does not actually sort of decenter some of our so-called neo-colonial or post-colonial sort of training in sort of in heritage management. We tend to think about management of our cultural heritage from what actually we call sort of the Western perspective. But indigenous people all over the world, and particularly here in North America, had actually looked at this landscape and as a cultural landscape, an entity which actually they have actually worked with it and actually sort of coexisted with it. And that knowledge, it's actually crucial to us to actually be able to start to think about how do we incorporate this into World Heritage USA. we need to reach out. We need to actually to be inclusive and expand our membership as well. By doing so, that's when actually we can really truly reach out our goals, which is actually to become much more inclusive and be the beacon, in a sense, show other countries that this is actually doable. And I urge every member of our organization to start to think, how do we actually be able to include some of this? How do we incorporate indigenous knowledge into our dialogue? Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Milford Donaldson. I'm on the board of World Heritage USA, and we're going to talk about culture and nature inseparable. So looking at the World Heritage List, it's clear that natural and cultural are not always conceived as an integrated whole. That is what has happened with ICOMOS over the past couple of years, is the idea that natural and cultural heritage should be recognized, understood, and managed together, not only in tandem, but as an indivisible whole. In a world where 150 to 200 species are lost every day and one language dies out every 2 weeks, the integration of natural and cultural protection is key to reversing the decline of the world's cultural and ecosystems. Nature in the broadest sense is the physical world or universe. And we all can define it differently, but nature can refer to the phenomenon of the physical world and also to life in general. Although humans are part of nature, human activity is often understood as a separate category from other natural phenomena. Whereas cultural is an umbrella term, which encompasses the social behavior, institutions and norms found in human societies, as well as the knowledge, beliefs, arts, laws, customs, capabilities, and habits of the individuals in these groups. And of course, these differ throughout the world. The ideas of culture and nature are often put in direct opposition to one another, but in reality, this distinction is much less rigid and so much more multifaceted. So since 1916, with the creation of National Park Service Organic Act, which created the National Park Service, there's been 61 major environmental laws just in the USA. And when you look at these, a lot of it is basically to protect the environment. And recently now, of course, ICOMOS has provided the operational guidelines for the implementation of the World Heritage Convention, but we still have a long ways to go. Large institutional intrusions, such as this, it sort of shows the impact, such as solar collectors, but along with that are wind turbines, geothermal plants on natural and cultural landscapes, a lot of it on Bureau of Land Management land. And protection designations have been developed for natural and cultural heritage in large landscapes. It's interesting in the quote that you see that Thomas Edison in 1931 said, "I'll put my money on sun and solar energy. What a source of power. I hope we don't have to wait until oil and coal run out before we tackle that." Cultural routes are something that is long overseen, and the US Highway 66, popularly known as Route 66 or the Mother Road from the 1920s, linked other existing roads together, 2,448 miles long. It really holds an elevated place in American consciousness and tells diverse stories of a mobile nation on the road. I was lucky enough to drive it in 1977. There are more than 250 buildings, bridges, road alignments, cultural trails, and other sites around along Route 66 that are listed on the National Register of Historic Places, including the Great Wigwam Hotel, which is in San Bernardino, and the Monument Valley, a region of the Colorado Plateau. So along the Klamath River, as it joins the Pacific Ocean on the Yurok tribal lands in Northern California, the tribe has called this riverscape. And the role of traditional and indigenous knowledge in heritage and nature conservation is always integrated with tribal communities. Embedded in the Yurok knowledge are the tangible and intangible features that govern the understanding of the world, including relationships to landforms, water, plant, and animal species, language, music, and customs. Salmon is not only an integral part of their culture, but it is also protected for this reason by the state of California. So as we keep going through life, I feel I'm getting older and older, and I'm just seeing things repeat themselves. Here we have on the left, Arizona's all complete solar city, leaving the desert untouched. This is from 1975 Arizona highways. And Los Angeles, from this wonderful publication in 1988, basically titled Los Angeles in 2013, where the techno comforts and urban stresses fast forward to one day's life of a future family with robotic service, all electrical vehicles, self-driving. However, it's pretty cool because the LA City Hall from 1928 and the Waterworks Monument from 1913 are still standing in this picture. So one of the items that's being watched by the ICOMOS Sustainable Development Goals Working Group, which I'm a member of, we see on the left in the lower corner, Le Corbusier's urbanism projects from Algiers in 1930 called his Ribbon City, where he proposes to put the transportation lines, the living quarters, and everything else in these cities, thereby freeing up nature. Or Buckminster Fuller's concept of covering New York City with a geodesic dome to lessen the heat absorption and coolness of the buildings that are there. So here we have neon. Saudi Arabia is the line. And the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, in order to leave his mark on the world, is developing this huge city in the desert named Neon. It's 1,600 feet tall, much taller than the Empire State Building, 660 feet wide, more than 2 football fields, American football that is, and 110 miles long to house 9 million residents. He's budgeted $500 billion for the project and seems determined to spend it. So the World Heritage USA invites you to submit your most promising cultural nature initiatives to ICOMOS. Towards the adoption of a connected approach to considering nature and culture, the commentary on nature culture keywords that you see in the lower right-hand slide here reflects a dialogue between disciplines within the heritage field and intends to develop a basis for common understanding of relevant terms among cultural and natural heritage professionals. In this first attempt to build common ground, ICOMOS has focused on 3 keyword families: bioculture, resilience, and traditional knowledge, which interconnect conservation of the cultural and natural heritage. So I invite you, World Heritage USA invites you to submit for 2023. You can go online and look at the prize winners from this year. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much to Helaine, Charles, and Wayne for those stirring presentations with lots of useful fodder to think through and react to and work on. I want to mention a few things that we have lined up for 23 that happen to dovetail very nicely with Wayne's presentation. One is that we'll start off the year with continuing our concerns for the damage that Doug referred to in his opening remarks happening along the US-Mexican border to spectacular places. On the Mexican side of the border, El Pinacate Reserve is a World Heritage Site. On the American side of the border is the Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument and the homeland of the Tohono O'odham Native people. Their reservation is contiguous with the monument, and their ancestral landscape extended across the monument and into the Cabeza Prieta National Wildlife Refuge and into Mexico. So this area is being subjected unnecessarily to severe damage There's a famous spring in Organ Pipe that is a native water supply, Quito Baquito Spring, important to many species of wildlife on both sides of the border, that was damaged due to extraction of a lot of water to mix concrete for the foundation of this unnecessary wall. One of the things that Doug is finding from his conversations while he's in Mexico with ICOMOS Mexico is a desire to do more binational cross-border work together. As you all know, we have two binational World Heritage sites with our friends and colleagues in ICOMOS Canada, with Glacier Waterton, and two national parks on the US side, Glacier Bay and Wrangell St. Elias National Park, and three sites in Canada, Tatshenshini, Kluane. And all of that is perhaps the one of the largest World Heritage sites in the world, over 17 million acres. But we don't have anything like that with our sister organization in Mexico. So we're going to talk some more about that. One is already on our tentative list on the US side with Big Bend. Organ Pipe has been considered as a sister to Pinacate in the past, but the wall, or the prospect of the wall doing this damage, has held it up. We think that more work should be done in this area. In part in relation to this is we're planning our conference and celebration of World Heritage in 2023 in San Antonio. We'll have a delegation from ICOMOS Mexico join us there. We'll discuss some of these things in some depth, and invite you all to join us there. This will be our first live conference since pre-pandemic, since we were in San Francisco in 2019. And we hope that some or all of you can join us if your calendar permits. We will kick off our webinar series in 23 with Redwood National Park. And it's actually a unique thing in that it is known officially as Redwood National and State Parks. They are administered jointly. The two agencies share office space, administrative space, maintenance yards, shared staff, cross borders as if the boundaries didn't exist. As Wayne pointed out, the Yurok tribe reservation on the Klamath River overlaps with Redwood National Park. The cultural heritage, ancestral landscape clearly extends across all of these national and state parks. And they have been seeking for a number of years a co-management arrangement. One step that they've made together this past year or two is the reintroduction of the California condor to its ancient habitat in the northern part of California. They've been previously reintroduced in Southern California, as you mostly know. But that's a beginning of a strong working relationship that we want to see continue, and we'll be discussing that in our webinar in February. And one last thing that is burgeoning as a part of our agenda that again relates to Wayne's presentation. You all know that there are 24 US World Heritage sites. 5 of them are Native American cultural sites. 6 of them are American history and architecture. Only one is already inscribed on the World Heritage List as a joint natural and cultural World Heritage Site. That is the Papahanaumokuakea in Northwest Hawaiian Islands. 12 are inscribed as natural areas. These are national parks and inscribed purely as natural areas. Every one of them has a significant Native American cultural heritage element to it. And we're going to pursue ways to get that cultural heritage recognized. Interior Secretary Holland and Park Service Director Chuck Sams have already been talking a great deal about the need and desire for co-stewardship or co-management with culturally relevant tribes. We think one piece of that is to develop at least an initiative that would be called retrospective reports, looking at each of these 12 national parks, World Heritage Sites, and to develop the analysis, the data, the documentation for the cultural heritage elements of those places. It may not be timely or even necessary to amend the original dossier work that was developed for the inscription on the heritage list, but we'd like certainly domestic US recognition officially, and perhaps a new way to gain international recognition for the cultural heritage elements of these World Heritage Sites. Finally, before we let you all go, I can't end this without urging you to renew your membership, to make a donation to our cause, our mission, our efforts. Every nonprofit in America has a budget that they develop from fundraising, from individuals, from organizations, from contracts and cooperative agreements, from government grants, and we're no exception. So you either have just received or will soon receive a year-end appeal from World Heritage USA. We urge you to pay attention to that and hopefully renew your membership and add an additional donation, tax deductible, of course, to support the mission, whether it's IEP or our cultural heritage work with Native peoples, or some other aspect, or just a general contribution would be most welcome. We thank you for your time and attention today and look forward to seeing you in the coming months in 2023. Thank you very much for joining us today.